everyone, welcome to Jay's Quick Thoughts. So today I wanted to go over an article from the Wall Street Journal talking about the future of the MCU. It's called Disney Wanted More from Marvel, Now It Wants Less. The superhero studio is cutting back TV production and fixing its film slate after fans lost the plot. Personally, I would argue that Disney lost the plot instead of the fans, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, it starts out with the head of Marvel Studios told colleagues recently that watching all of the comic book giants' new TV shows and films had started to feel more like homework than entertainment, which has been a common complaint about the MCU for like 5 years at least. And I've had issues with this too, where it feels like you have to consume all this content just to go to the theater and understand what's going on for their latest movie. And before it was exciting that they all fed into each other, but then it just became too bloated. So I am glad that Disney is finally acknowledging this fact. The problem Kevin Feige acknowledged is that in an effort to satisfy their parent company Disney's hunger for content on its new streaming service, the studio behind the Avengers churned out too many movies and shows with interconnected stories. The delusion material from the MCU on Disney Plus overwhelmed and eventually alienated viewers. It also stretched Feige and his team's resources thin, diluting the quality of their output. And people have been complaining about the effects from the MCU movies, and even Taika Waititi kind of roasted his own movie about the bad effects.
Okay. Does that look real?
In that particular shot, no, actually. It doesn't really, right? When you look close.
It need to be more blue.
Which I don't think is on the artists personally, considering the fact that they are overworked and underpaid. But still, it's not a good look for him to be roasting his own movie like that. Marvel's box office sales, streaming popularity, and formerly untouchable position in pop culture suffered. Now Feige is leading an internal overhaul aimed at getting the studio back on track. Marvel is making fewer TV shows with standalone stories that don't require prior knowledge of the MCU, which I think is for the best. Feige is focused on fixing the studio's movie slate following recent flops like February's Captain America: Brave New World. At least it wasn't as bad as the Marvels. That has to count for something. Oh, it also says here, yeah, the Marvels did horribly. 206 million, and then the Incredible Hulk did 265 million. Also, there was another Hulk movie before Iron Man, but I think Iron Man is basically where the MCU really took off, though. But yeah, Brave New World didn't do as bad as some of the other ones, so there's that. Anyway, back to where we were. The first major test for his reset arrived this week with the Thunderbolts, about a team of sidekicks, has-beens, and other C-listers who saved the world in the Avengers' absence. I mean, I think Bucky, I wouldn't necessarily call him a has-been or a C-lister, but I have heard good things about the Thunderbolts. I haven't seen it myself, but at least I've heard good things. Early box office sales indicate it will open to between 70 million and 75 million in the US and Canada this weekend, which would put it in the lowest tier of the company's releases. Still, reviews for the Thunderbolts have been largely positive, and yeah, that's what I was hearing too. I still have to go see it. If fans like the film, they'll likely be primed to see July's Fantastic Four: First Steps. That movie story will lead directly into a pair of Avengers sequels in 2026 and 27 that Marvel needs to be massive hits to restore its former glory. Feige declined requests for an interview. This article is based on interviews with more than a dozen people who have worked at Marvel or done business with the studio. So the article goes on to talk about Feige's history in Hollywood and talks about the success of the MCU, which culminated in Avengers Endgame, and a lot of people, including myself, thought that that would probably be a good place to just end the series, but you know, they're not gonna stop milking that cow. And then it picks up again with, during Marvel's heyday in the 2010s, Feige was heavily involved in film development. He deployed lower-ranking executives to supervise shooting, then got his hands dirty again in the editing room, often making significant changes and ordering new scenes. And then it also goes on to talk about all the reshoots they tend to do. Like, according to this, his right-hand man, I guess, Louis Despacito, said that we can fix any movie if we shoot it again. So 2013's Thor: The Dark World, there were 35 days of reshoots, longer than the entire production of many low-budget films. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but yeah, reshooting is something they do a lot. Though the studio had a few early duds, Feige's process worked almost flawlessly for years. Every film Marvel released between 2010 and 2019 was a hit, grossing on average about $1 billion. Fans loved that each had a distinct tone, but were bound together by an overarching narrative, and that was their bread and butter for the decade. The movies were overseen by a small team of creative executives who came to be known as the Parliament. Most had been with the company since its founding or joined as assistants and were promoted, giving Marvel a family-like culture. Feige was the studio's beloved and charismatic dad and creative genius from whom everyone saw attention and approval. So this article is like really glazing Feige, honestly. But then they started making more MCU. So soon after Endgame, creative staffers began meeting in their office on the Disney Studio lot to figure out where the MCU could possibly go next. In the nearby executive building, Disney's senior leadership had another priority. Chief executive Bob Iger was launching Disney Plus as his answer to Netflix. He needed loads of new series for it and was counting on Marvel to provide many of them. The strategy became just expansion, 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 said a person who worked at Marvel at the time. And I think that came back to bite them. And honestly, Disney Plus probably wasn't the best idea for Disney. But anyway, Feige recently told colleagues he agreed to the plan because of the zealousness to tell more stories and a desire to be an excellent corporate citizen. It turned out to be a mistake. Well, I'm glad they admit that. I think he also kind of like admits here that it was a suit decision, you know, excellent corporate citizen. And sometimes they do prioritize what they think will make the most money over what's actually best for the story or like the ongoing story. And then you end up with a bloated mess. So here we are. Marvel's first two Disney Plus shows came out in 2021, the time travel adventure Loki and WandaVision, which continued the stories of two heroes from Endgame in a satirical sitcom world. Both were hits. But Marvel's transition from producing a few hours of movie content annually to several dozen hours of streaming shows and films eventually broke down the studio's processes. A pair of executives oversaw each show, while Feige remained the final decision maker on every significant creative issue, even though there were exceptionally more decisions to make each day. Yeah, so he probably got stretched too thin, and the resources got stretched too thin, and also people weren't really communicating properly between all these projects, like what happened with WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness, where the people who made that movie did not actually watch the show, even though it was a direct sequel, so it was all a huge mess, and that has led to them finally realizing that it was a huge mess, but, you know, it might be maybe not too little too late, but at least they have taken a hit before they finally came to their senses. People who worked at Marvel in the early 2020s said it was challenging to secure enough time with Feige to get his feedback. As a result, they sometimes spent weeks on work that proved irrelevant once he weighed in, then found themselves with little time to implement his changes before the deadline. Desperate staffers resorted to chasing Feige in the halls to get answers. Yikes. Long known as one of the most frugal studios in Hollywood, Marvel began spending like crazy as other media companies started streaming services. Cost was no object in a race to impress Wall Street with big increases in subscribers. So yeah, it comes back to corporate suits and pleasing the shareholders and all that. Marvel series made in the early 2020s regularly cost more than $100 million a season and sometimes approached $200 million because they included A-list actors and costly visual effects. So they just were not budgeting properly, and there were too many time constraints and time crunches. And, you know, in the end, it's not too surprising that Marvel's fatigue set in, but that didn't have to happen. And I don't know if they can turn it around, but, you know, I'm still rooting for them because I did really enjoy the MCU, and, you know, maybe they can recapture. Both Marvel and Disney really need to recapture their magic. But moving on. The internal dysfunction began to show in Marvel's output. Viewers complained that there was too much Marvel content to keep up with, and a growing proportion of it felt subpar. I loved it for so many years, but after all the TV shows and everything, it just started getting a little confusing and all over the place, said Leslie Rodriguez, a 23-year-old social media manager. Fans rejected big-budget events series like the alien attack drama Secret Invasion, starring Samuel L. Jackson, shows the company was proud of, including Ms. Marvel, about a Pakistani-American teenager who gained superpowers, failed to attract many viewers. In theaters, Marvel's biggest hit during this period were nostalgia plays that tied up old storylines such as Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was critical to the MCU's future because it featured the title villain of the next planned Avengers sequel, subtitled The Kang Dynasty, but the early 2023 film flopped at the box office and was widely panned, not to mention all the drama that went down with Kang's actor. Jonathan Majors, the actor who played Kang the Conqueror in Marvel films, was convicted of assault and harassment in December 2023. He was found guilty of assaulting his then girlfriend, Grace Jabari, while he avoided jail time, so he did not go to jail. Okay. He was sentenced to probation and a year-long counseling program. Well, he's out of the MCU. So the last few years have not been great for Marvel. Meanwhile, Wall Street's obsession with streaming growth gave way to a focus on profitability. Yeah, Hollywood keeps making the same mistakes. It's a shame. Iger and Feige began scrutinizing Marvel's costs and creative choices more closely. At the last second, Marvel decided the script for its vampire movie Blade wasn't good enough and halted production in 2023, while equipment was being shipped to sound stages in Atlanta. So just mismanaging things constantly and not being on top of things the way they need to be. And they finally wised up, but can they turn it around? When production started on the 2023 film The Marvels, the filmmakers got little attention from the overstretched Feige. After Quantumania bombed, Feige became more involved, hoping to avoid a second faceplant in 1 year. Ouch. That did not work out for them. The filmmakers cycled through dozens of versions of a voiceover to catch up viewers with plot points from past movies and series they needed to understand, but it wasn't enough. So was Feige involved heavily in the Marvels? Because if that's so, then it's on him. The Marvels, which cost around $300 million, was Marvel's biggest ever bomb, grossing just $206 million. So it didn't even break even. I guess Feige being more involved didn't help. More doom, less gloom. Since Marvel's early years, Feige's Parliament has gone to a retreat every fall in Palm Springs, California, where they would plan out the future of the MCU. Can you imagine just hanging out in Palm Springs talking about what movies you're gonna make? I wonder if they expect us to feel sorry for them. The get-together from 2023 was somber. Many of Marvel's movies and TV shows weren't working. The studio just laid off employees for the first time in its history. Parliament members discussed whether they could salvage plans for Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. They also talked about a new TV strategy in which shows would have plots divorced from the MCU, making them easier for fans to understand. And I don't think that's a bad idea. They probably should have been thinking about this a few years earlier. The company decided to cut back significantly on TV production. Quantity in our case diluted quality, and Marvel has suffered greatly from that. Iger said at the New York Times Dealbook Summit that November, Marvel was releasing only 1 or 2 live-action streaming series annually starting next year, and has already ordered multiple seasons of some of their stories can continue without crossing over to the big screen. A senior executive is overseeing television so Feige can focus on film. Yeah, he should have been divvying people up to begin with, so that way he didn't have everything on him. I wonder if he liked being the final say in everything, but ultimately that's not going to be a healthy way to, you gotta have a work-life balance. And at least he finally caught on. Marvel's top priority is ensuring the next 2 Avengers extend the track record of the franchise, which has provided 4 of the company's 5 highest-grossing films. Around early 2024, executives decided to dub Kang and start brainstorming who would make a better antagonist for their next superhero team-up. I'm surprised they're not bringing up the fact that Jonathan Majors was convicted of DA. Feige had been talking for more than a year to Robert Downey Jr., who played Iron Man and was beloved by fans, about returning to the MCU. They discussed him playing Doctor Doom, one of Marvel's best-known comic book villains, but they hadn't determined when or in what film. I don't know, that kind of feels like a gimmick in my opinion. I understand that he's probably going to be from another universe, but still. I don't know, we'll see what they'll do with Galactus in the new Fantastic Four movie. Marvel executives concluded that Downey was the solution to their Avengers problem. Again, it kind of seems like a little more of a corporate decision than really thinking about the creative decisions, but we'll see how it plays out for them. They retitled the 2026 movie Avengers Doomsday with their biggest star in the title role. Feige also rehired Anthony and Joe Russo, who directed Downey in Avengers Endgame. Again, they're going back to that nostalgia bait and going back to what worked before. I don't know how it'll play out in this new context, but we'll see. And then they talk about it here too. Bringing back the talent behind the blockbuster for its sequel is one of the most expensive propositions in Hollywood, but people who have worked with Feige say he likes to go back to people he trusts, particularly in moments of urgency, and particularly when it comes to money. To get fans excited about this new plan, Marvel had Downey take off a Dr. Doom mask and reveal himself at San Diego Comic-Con in 2024, a moment that immediately went viral online. I saw the whole announcement, and not to exaggerate, I fell to my knees, Bailey Bowen, a 25-year-old teacher's aide, said while peeking at the red carpet for the Thunderbolts premiere in Hollywood Monday. In his introduction to screening that night, Thunderbolts director Jake Schreier said, "When I first started on the movie, Kevin said, make it different. This weekend's box office receipts will show whether that's what Marvel fans want." And then it finishes up with, "In many ways, Marvel has reverted to its strategy from before the streaming boom, as if the past 5 years had been a dream. Maybe more like a nightmare from Marvel's perspective." I mean, they basically just admitted that, like, every decision from the last 5 years was a bad decision. But good for them for wising up. As he did when Marvel Studios started, Feige has an expansive vision for his company's big screen future. The upcoming Avengers movies are expected to introduce the X-Men, one of Marvel's most popular superhero teams, to the MCU. Feige has told colleagues he has a 10-year plan for the characters. I'm not surprised they're going that route. They did introduce the X-Men already in the Marvels, which nobody saw, so... But yeah, they're probably going to focus on nostalgia, they're probably going to focus on what has worked in the past, even if that means rehashing it. And all I can say is, I do hope that it works out for them, because I think it would be great to see the MCU recapture its former glory. I don't know if that's necessarily possible, but it would be nice. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how all this works out for Marvel in the end. And I think it is really good that they finally did kind of come to their senses. Because we've been saying this stuff for years now. They flooded the market with too much content, and that came back to bite them. So I want to see them take their time more, even if that means we get less content. But that's not really a bad thing either. Because like he was talking about, they should be focusing on quality over quantity. But let me know your thoughts on all of this. Are you excited for the X-Men to be introduced formally? Are you happy to hear that they're cutting back on things? Or do you think they're going to focus too much on the nostalgia and Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom isn't a good choice? Or, just let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members. Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Lucas Geist, J Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Dakari the Professor, Todd McCaffrey, Omni Fair, General Bolivar, Cavalcoj, Strider Exile, Phil C, Killer Bomb, Slawa Saporiguez, Entwined Boot 301, Griffin of Might, Frankie Camarillo, Datadyne Executive, Crimson Phantom, Jin the Goblin, Papa Hud 69, The Gengar King, and Daunter. Thank you for the support, and if you want to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.